Good morning. Wonderful to be with you, and thank you for all you do, and thank you for this caucus. Thank you for meeting and being so active. You have me at hello, because like Charlie said, all of us have family members and good friends who are battling this disease, and I think we just can't afford not to be investing in prevention, in research, and really developing all kinds of new treatments and cures. So it is a passion of mine, and I unfortunately have lost two of my best friends over the past 2 years to cancer. One to lung cancer just last year, my best girlfriends. And this, I guess it was just a week or so ago, we introduced the Women in Lung Cancer Research and Preventive Services Act of 2018. Now, my friend was a smoker, but we know that there are many people with lung cancer who aren't smokers, and there's all other reasons and causes. So we need to have that research and that and prevention in the areas of what prevention do you not know that you're not preventing because you don't know these causes. I think the increase in the NIH spending and National Cancer Institute is so important. Another bill that I've introduced and working on with my colleague Tom Cole, who is a great advocate on the Appropriations Committee, also like Charlie in advocating for more research dollars. This bill would provide more research dollars for children's cancer. And what it does is it takes about a little over $300 million of money that's just sitting in a pot over at the Treasury Department for use in matching funds for presidential elections. The only thing is, since 2008, after 2008, nobody has used this money because presidential races are too expensive now that nobody wants to be bound or limited by the presidential election fund. So when people check off that little box on their taxes, it's going to this fund that probably no one will ever use again. So instead of having it sit there for nobody to use, and I think politicians can raise their own money anyway, I'd rather see that 300 million plus go to children's cancer. So we are hoping to move that bill this spring. So that would just go straight over to NIH for all the things that we might want to do. It's much like what we did with the Gabriella Miller Act, which the Miller family they're actually constituents of mine. And back then, Eric Cantor had worked on, it was another piece of the election fund that wasn't really needed and was sort of anachronistic, but was, collecting dust on the money, moved it over to children's research. So this is really just kind of 2.0 for the same concept. So, whenever there are bills in this area, I know pretty much if there's a bill on cancer and research and prevention, I want to be on it and I want to be pushing this. So it's so helpful for you as advocates when you come in to explain, what we're doing, having the doctors talk to us and all the possibilities there. Being so close to NIH, I have a lot of my research universities engaged in this, and I think we are at a critical time with the public-private partnerships going on now. I have a constituent in my district, Dwight Shar, who has been very successful in life, and he decided he wanted to take $50 million and invest it into preventive medicine. And so he started a center that's over at the Inova Hospital in Fairfax. They took the, ExxonMobil had this big campus, and they shut it down and moved back to Houston. And they had this big, huge campus with a building there that Dwight thought would be much better used for cancer research, preventative medicine. And so now we have a lot of business colleagues, and the technology, the guy who's leading it, Todd Stottlemyre, is a tech guy. So he's bringing in all these tech guys who might have a little extra money floating around and who can invest in this. But that's why I think it's so important that we get that research money into NIH on the public side so that these partnerships that are possible now, we really can leverage this money that's available and people are interested in doing this now, because oftentimes some of the research and cures they can do on the outside can be a little bit more innovative. I know one of my best friends that I mentioned that I lost 2 years ago to pancreatic cancer, he was a brain surgeon, and he had no symptoms. He was healthy, he runner, did everything The only thing he did that wasn't particularly healthy is when he did brain surgery, he would have to, hunch over operating for 7 or 8 hours, so his back had started going. So his back started bothering him. He had no idea. He didn't have diabetes, wasn't a smoker, had none of the symptoms of pancreatic cancer. And he was one of those people who got it stage 4, 13 months later. But while he was going through that, since he was one of the most brilliant people I've ever known, he was so engaged in learning about this disease. It hadn't been in his wheelhouse before. And he said, it is so exciting what is going on out there. And I really do, and he was like, if I could get to 3 years, I think this is really going to become a chronic disease because of the prevention and the earlier detection and things. And unfortunately, he only got 13 months. But that passion that he had, that because initially being a doctor, when he got that diagnosis, he's like, yeah, well, I'm a goner. This is it. But then as he got more involved and engaged and kind of got his doctor hat off and really got into the research and met this whole community, he realized there was so much more going on than he even knew as a pretty advanced, he was one of the top brain surgeons in the country. And one of my friends who was in the technology community told me about some research he had started up that was totally on the outside. And I said, Chuck, have you heard about this? They're working with PanCan, they're doing this. And he was kind of like, yeah, we're going everywhere. We've been up to Dana-Farber, I've been to Mayo. He was a brainiac. So I kind of didn't, okay, all this, so I won't bug you. And then I said, well, what if he doesn't know? And I kept pushing him. And then I started pushing his wife. And he came back a few weeks later and said, hey, can you give me the number of that guy? And it turned out he was eligible for their trial. Now, he ended up actually picking another trial instead, but just to understand how quickly everything is moving, somebody who had gone to all the top places, who had, every brainiac surgeon, on the planet trying to find a cure for Chuck, because it was like, we needed Chuck here because Chuck always took the toughest cases on brain tumors and everything else. And people, when doctors would just walk away, Chuck would go in and be like, no, I'll do it, and save so many lives. So there were so many people trying to find this. Yet here in McLean, where we both lived, he didn't know all this research was going on in a whole nother area. So that's why I think it's so important what you're doing, and that we get more money into the public sector, leveraging all this private sector work that's going on too, pairing it up. And I just think it's time for just an explosion on all of this if we get all of the efforts right here. So thank you for all that you're doing. It's a privilege to work on this issue. It's obviously very personal for me, and it is one of the things that really gets me up every day in the morning and gets me to really nag my colleagues about moving these things and making sure that with everything else going on. Yesterday I went over to the White House to talk about MS-13 gangs and accidentally ended up talking about government shutdowns, which I didn't think I was going to talk about. But this is one of the reasons which I am opposed to government shutdowns on any administration. And one of the reasons I am so opposed to it is I do not want one day to go when our NIH researchers aren't looking for a cure, aren't doing something. I don't want them worrying about who's essential and who's not. Everybody at NIH is essential to me, to our lives, to my children, to my friends. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.